Patricia Lawson had survived a collapsing stranger in her salad, a home invasion by wannabe gangsters, and 3 months of falling hopelessly in love with the most stubborn man in Los Angeles. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this. His MO is finding black girls, innocent ones, women who don't know what he really is. The words echoed in her head as she stood in the hospital parking lot, staring at Gerald's text message like it was written in a foreign language. "Come home, I missed you." Home. Was it her home? Or was she just the latest in a pattern she didn't even know existed? Patricia looked at the road where the mysterious woman's car had vanished. Then she looked back at her phone, and for the first time since she'd met Gerald Kyung, Patricia Lawson was going to do something she'd never done before. She was going to investigate her own boyfriend. Because Patricia didn't crumble. Patricia didn't cry. Patricia got answers.
Hey, beautiful people, welcome back to our channel. Before we continue, we need to have a real conversation with you. Our YouTube channel was recently demonetized. All our revenue was withheld. And honestly, it's been a difficult time. We've loved creating these stories for you. Your support has meant everything to us.
But here's the good news. We're not stopping. We're just moving.
The full part 2 and 3 of this story, every twist, every confrontation, every heart-pounding moment is available right now on our Patreon. The link is in the description below and pinned in the comments. We've made it super easy for you to join. Now, let us give you a taste of what's waiting for you.
Patricia drove back to the mansion on autopilot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Her mind was racing, replaying the mysterious woman's words over and over, like a song stuck on repeat. His MO is finding black girls. He makes them feel special. And then what? The woman hadn't finished. She'd just driven away, leaving Patricia with a half warning and a stomach full of dread. By the time Patricia pulled through the mansion gates, she'd made a decision. She wasn't going to confront Gerald. Not yet. Not until she had more information. Because Patricia Lawson didn't make accusations based on the cryptic warnings of parking lot strangers. She gathered evidence. She asked questions. She figured things out. And then, if necessary, she burned things down. She walked through the front door with her usual confidence, her face carefully neutral. Gerald was waiting in the foyer, looking unfairly handsome in a soft grey sweater and dark pants. His face lit up when he saw her. "There you are." He crossed the space between them and kissed her forehead. "How was your first day back?" "Exhausting," Patricia said, and it wasn't a lie. One of my patients tried to convince me that his rash was a government tracking device. Gerald's lips twitched. "Was it?" "Sadly, no. Just an allergic reaction to cheap laundry detergent." She pulled back slightly, offering him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm going to take a shower. Long day." Gerald studied her face for a moment, something flickering in his expression. "Are you all right? You seem distant." He notices everything, Patricia thought. Of course he does. "Just tired," she said lightly. "Hospital shifts hit different after 3 months of playing house with a billionaire." "I'm not a billionaire." "Sure you're not." She turned and headed toward the stairs before he could ask any more questions. Behind her, she could feel Gerald's eyes following her, concerned and confused. Good, she thought. Stay confused. I need time to think. That night, Patricia lay in bed next to Gerald, staring at the ceiling while he slept. His breathing was deep and even, his face relaxed in sleep. He looked younger when he slept, softer, the sharp edges of his personality smoothed away by unconsciousness. Is this face capable of manipulation? Patricia wondered. Is this man capable of using women and discarding them? She wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed no. But instincts could be wrong. Feelings could be manipulated. And Patricia hadn't survived 24 years as a black woman in America by trusting blindly. She slipped out of bed quietly and padded down the hallway to the library. If there were answers to be found, she'd find them herself. Patricia was not, as it turned out, a natural detective. Her first attempt at investigating Gerald's past involved trying to casually search his home office while he was in a meeting. She made it approximately 4 minutes before Dae-soo appeared in the doorway. "Miss Patricia," he said, his deep voice carefully neutral. Can I help you find something? Patricia froze, her hand hovering over a filing cabinet she absolutely should not have been opening. I was looking for stamps, she said. Stamps. Yes, stamps. I need to mail something. Daesu's expression didn't change, but Patricia could have sworn she saw his left eyebrow twitch. The stamps are in the kitchen drawer, he said, by the refrigerator. Right, of course, the kitchen. Patricia straightened up, face burning. That's where I was going. I just took a wrong turn. The kitchen is in the opposite direction. I have a terrible sense of direction. You've lived here for 3 months. Temporary amnesia. Patricia walked past him with as much dignity as she could muster. It's a medical condition. Very serious. Daesu said nothing, but as Patricia retreated down the hallway, she distinctly heard what sounded like a muffled snort. Her second attempt went slightly better. Patricia waited until Gerald left for an off-site meeting, something about quarterly projections that made her eyes glaze over just hearing about it, and then found Mrs. Park in the kitchen. Mrs. Park, Patricia said, settling onto a stool at the kitchen island with studied casualness. Can I ask you something? The older woman looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, her eyes warm. Of course, dear. How long have you worked for the Kyung family? Oh, nearly 15 years now. I started when Mr. Gerald was just a teenager. Mrs. Park smiled fondly. He was very serious, even then, always reading business books instead of comic books like normal boys. And during that time, Patricia chose her words carefully. Were there other women, who lived here, I mean, besides family? Mrs. Park's chopping slowed. Other women? Like caregivers, nurses, people who were brought in for specific purposes and then left. There was a long pause. Mrs. Park set down her knife and turned to face Patricia fully. Her expression was unreadable. You've heard something, she said. It wasn't a question. Patricia felt her heart rate spike. Maybe. About Yolanda. The name hit Patricia like a physical blow. So there was someone. The mysterious woman wasn't lying, at least not about everything. Who is Yolanda? Patricia asked, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. Mrs. Park sighed heavily. I wondered when this would come up. So it's true. There was another woman. It's complicated. Mrs. Park wiped her hands on her apron and sat down across from Patricia. Yolanda Price was a physical therapist. She was hired 2 years ago to help Mr. Gerald's father during his final months. He had a stroke, and he needed round-the-clock care. Gerald's father hired her, not Gerald. Correct. Mr. Kyung Sr. was very particular about his caregivers. He preferred, Mrs. Park hesitated, he preferred black women. He found them more patient, more competent. He said they reminded him of a nurse who saved his life in the Korean War. Patricia absorbed this information slowly. So Yolanda was here for Gerald's father? Yes. But during that time, she and Mr. Gerald developed a friendship. She was here constantly. They talked. She was young, pretty, kind. Mrs. Park's voice dropped, and she fell in love with him. Patricia's chest tightened. Did Gerald love her back? No. Mrs. Park shook her head firmly. Mr. Gerald was kind to her. He's kind to everyone on staff, but he was consumed with grief. His father was dying. He was preparing to take over an empire he never wanted. Romance was the last thing on his mind. But Yolanda didn't know that. No, she didn't. Mrs. Park's eyes were sad. When Mr. Kyung Sr. passed, the household went through a major restructuring. Staff members who were hired specifically for his care were let go, including Yolanda. Let me guess, Gerald didn't handle the goodbye personally. Mrs. Park winced. He was overwhelmed. He asked Daesu to handle the final arrangements, the severance, the references, the departure logistics. He sent his bodyguard to break up with someone who thought they were in a relationship. It wasn't a relationship, not to him, but yes. Mrs. Park's voice was heavy with regret. It was poorly handled, and Yolanda was hurt, deeply hurt. Patricia sat in silence, processing everything she'd just heard. The picture was becoming clearer now. Gerald wasn't a predator. He wasn't targeting black women for some sick game. But he was emotionally oblivious, capable of causing real damage simply because he didn't pay attention. Was that better? Worse? Patricia wasn't sure yet. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. Mrs. Park reached across the island and covered Patricia's hand with her own. "Because you're not Yolanda," she said quietly. "I've watched Mr. Gerald for 15 years. I've seen him with business partners, family members, staff, potential romantic interests. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Patricia's throat tightened. "He's different with you," Mrs. Park continued. "He laughs, he relaxes, he actually eats breakfast instead of mainlining coffee until noon. You've changed him, Patricia, for the better. But what if he changes back?" Patricia's voice came out smaller than she intended. "What if I'm just another temporary person in his life?" Mrs. Park squeezed her hand. "Then you ask him, directly, because whatever else Mr. Gerald is, he's not a liar. If you ask him the truth, he'll give it to you." Patricia nodded slowly. She had more information now, but she still needed to hear it from Gerald himself. Patricia waited 3 more days. 3 days of acting normal. 3 days of shared meals and movie nights and casual conversation that felt like walking through a minefield. Gerald knew something was wrong. She could see it in the way he watched her. Careful, questioning, confused. Several times he started to ask, and several times she deflected. But she couldn't keep deflecting forever. On the 4th day, Patricia found Gerald in his study, reading through a stack of documents that probably determined the fate of small nations. "We need to talk," she said from the doorway. Gerald looked up immediately, setting aside his papers. "Okay." "Not here." Patricia glanced around the study, the same room where they'd first kissed, where the Lee brothers had been defeated, where so much had already happened. "The garden. I want to be outside for this." Gerald's expression flickered with concern, but he nodded and stood without argument. They walked to the garden in silence, settling on a bench beneath a flowering tree. The afternoon sun was warm, birds were singing, and everything was peaceful and beautiful, and completely at odds with the storm building in Patricia's chest. "Something happened," Gerald said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. At the hospital. Your first day back." Patricia looked at him sharply. "How did you know?" "Because that's when you changed." Gerald's dark eyes were steady on her face. "You've been distant ever since." "Guarded. I didn't push because I thought you might tell me in your own time, but clearly that's not happening. You're very observant. I'm very invested." He turned to face her fully. "Tell me what happened, Patricia." She took a deep breath. "A woman approached me outside the hospital. Young, pretty, black, long dark hair." Patricia watched Gerald's face carefully. "She told me to be careful of you. She said your MO is preying on innocent black girls, finding them, making them feel special, and then..." She trailed off, letting the silence fill in the rest. Gerald had gone very still. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and stricken. "Yolanda," he said quietly, "so you know who I'm talking about." "Yes." Gerald closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were filled with an emotion Patricia couldn't quite name. "Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about." "Then talk, because right now, all I have is a stranger's warning and a lot of very concerning implications." Gerald was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy. "Yolanda Price was a physical therapist hired to care for my father during the last 6 months of his life. She was competent, kind, and patient with a man who was not easy to be patient with." Gerald's jaw tightened. "My father was difficult at the best of times. Dying made him worse." "Mrs. Park told me some of this," Patricia admitted, "but I want to hear it from you." Gerald nodded. "Yolanda was here constantly. We talked often, mostly about my father, his care, his declining condition. She was easy to talk to, and during a time when I was drowning in grief and corporate responsibilities, that mattered." "Did you have feelings for her?" "No." Gerald's response was immediate and firm. "I cared about her as a person, as someone who was helping my family, But romantic feelings? No. I was barely functioning, Patricia. My father was dying. I was preparing to take over everything he'd built, and half the board was circling like vultures, waiting to tear the company apart. Romance wasn't even on my radar. But Yolanda didn't know that. Gerald's expression cracked, showing genuine pain. No, she didn't, and I was too wrapped up in my own grief to notice the signs. The lingering looks, the personal questions, the way she'd find excuses to spend extra time with me. He shook his head. I should have seen it. I should have addressed it directly, but I didn't. What happened when your father died? Everything fell apart. Gerald's voice was raw. The funeral, the will, the corporate transition, it all happened at once. The household staff that had been hired specifically for my father's care had to be let go, including Yolanda. And you sent Daesu to handle it. Gerald flinched. Yes. You sent your bodyguard to fire a woman who thought she was in a relationship with you. I didn't know she thought. Gerald stopped, his jaw tightening. That's not an excuse. I know that. I was overwhelmed, and I took the coward's way out. I let Daesu handle the severance packages, the final conversations, all of it. I told myself it was efficient. In reality, it was avoidance. Gerald, Patricia's voice was sharp. A woman gave you her heart, and you had your bodyguard hand her a check and show her the door. I know. Gerald's voice was barely above a whisper. I know how it looks, how it was. I handled it badly, worse than badly. I treated her departure like a business transaction, because business transactions were all I knew how to process at that point. Patricia stared at him, her emotions warring inside her chest. Part of her wanted to scream, to demand to know how he could be so careless, so oblivious, so utterly thoughtless with another person's feelings. But another part of her, the part that had spent 3 months learning the complicated landscape of Gerald Kyung's heart, understood. He wasn't malicious. He was broken. A man raised by a hard father, taught to value business over emotion, suddenly drowning in grief, with no idea how to swim. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. The woman in the parking lot, Patricia said slowly. Yolanda. She said you prey on black women, that it's a pattern. My father had a pattern, Gerald corrected quietly. He specifically requested black caregivers throughout his life. He said, Gerald's expression twisted with old pain. He said they reminded him of a nurse who saved his life during the war. A black American army nurse named Dorothy. He never forgot her kindness, and he sought it out for the rest of his life. So Yolanda wasn't even the first. No, there were others before her. Caregivers, nurses, household staff. My father had a type, and the household accommodated it. Gerald met Patricia's eyes directly. But I am not my father, Patricia. I didn't seek you out because of your race. I sought you out because you yelled at me in a hospital while I was bleeding into your lunch. Despite everything, Patricia felt her lips twitch. You did ruin my salad. I've apologized for that multiple times. Not enough times. Gerald's expression softened with something like hope. I'll apologize forever, if that's what it takes. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, letting everything settle inside her. She had the truth now, not a pretty truth. Gerald had genuinely hurt someone through carelessness and emotional avoidance, but not the predatory pattern she'd feared either. You should have told me about Yolanda, she finally said, before, when we were getting serious. I know, I should have. Gerald ran a hand through his hair. But honestly, I barely thought about her. That entire period of my life is a blur of grief and paperwork. Yolanda was part of it, but she wasn't significant to me, which is exactly the problem, isn't it? Yes, it is. I caused damage without even realizing it, without even considering that my actions, or inactions, could hurt someone so deeply. Gerald's eyes were dark with remorse. And the worst part is, if you hadn't told me about this encounter, I might never have known. I might have gone my whole life without understanding the pain I caused. Patricia absorbed this in silence. Then she stood up. Gerald's face fell. Patricia, I need space. Her voice was calm but firm. Not forever, just for a little while. I need to think about everything without being surrounded by your ridiculously expensive furniture and your housekeeper feeding me comfort food. Where will you go? My apartment. I still have one, you know. I didn't give up my entire life when I moved in here. Gerald stood too, his hands flexing at his sides, like he wanted to reach for her, but was holding himself back. How long? I don't know yet. Patricia looked at him, really looked at him, at the fear in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he was clearly restraining himself from arguing or pleading. But Gerald, this isn't me giving up. This is me taking time to make sure I'm making the right decision for the right reasons. And if you decide, Gerald's voice caught, if you decide this isn't what you want, then I'll tell you that directly, to your face, like an adult. Patricia's expression hardened slightly, because that's what you should have done with Yolanda. And it's what I'll do with you, if it comes to that. Gerald nodded slowly, pain etched across his features but acceptance in his posture. I understand. Good. Patricia turned toward the house. I'll pack a bag and leave tonight. Patricia. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Gerald's eyes were glistening, but his voice was steady. I love you. Whatever you decide, that doesn't change. Patricia's heart clenched. I know, she said softly. That's what makes this so hard. Patricia's apartment felt strange after 3 months in the mansion. It was small, quiet. The refrigerator hummed loudly. The upstairs neighbor's footsteps were audible through the ceiling, and the hot water took approximately 17 years to warm up. She'd forgotten how normal people lived. Normal people who don't date Korean business moguls with complicated pasts, she thought wryly, dropping her bag on the couch. The first night was hard. She barely slept, her mind replaying every conversation, every moment, every piece of information she'd gathered over the past week. The second night was harder. She found herself reaching for her phone constantly, wanting to text Gerald, wanting to hear his voice. She didn't. On the third day, there was a knock at her door. Patricia opened it, expecting her landlord or maybe a delivery person. She did not expect Dae-soo. The massive bodyguard stood in her hallway looking profoundly uncomfortable, like a bear that had accidentally wandered into a dollhouse. Miss Patricia, he said formally. Dae-soo. Patricia blinked. This is unexpected. I apologize for the intrusion. He shifted his weight awkwardly. I wanted to speak with you, if you have a moment. Patricia considered closing the door in his face, but curiosity won out. Come in. Try not to break anything. Dae-soo ducked through the doorway and stood in her small living room, looking around like he'd never seen a space under 2,000 square feet. You can sit, Patricia said, gesturing to her couch. Dae-soo looked at the couch with visible doubt, then carefully lowered himself onto the edge, perching like he was afraid of crushing it. Would you like water? Patricia asked. I have water. Also more water. My hospitality options are limited. No thank you. Dae-soo cleared his throat, then cleared it again, then stared at the ceiling. Patricia waited. I came to apologize, he finally said, the words coming out like he was passing kidney stones. For what? For my role in the Yolanda situation. Dae-soo's jaw tightened. I was the one who delivered her final severance, who explained that her services were no longer needed, who escorted her from the property. Patricia sat down in the chair across from him. That wasn't your decision to make. No, but I made it too easy for him. Dae-soo met her eyes, and Patricia was surprised to see genuine regret there. Mr. Gerald asked me to handle it. I could have pushed back, could have told him it was inappropriate. Instead, I just did what I was told. Why? Because that's what I do, what I've always done. Dae-soo's massive hands clenched on his knees. I've worked for the Kyung family for 12 years, first for his father, then for him. I'm good at following orders. I'm not good at questioning them. But you're questioning them now. Dae-soo was quiet for a moment. You've changed him, he said finally. Mr. Gerald, since you arrived, he's different. He laughs more. He sleeps more. He actually eats meals instead of surviving on coffee and spite. A ghost of a smile crossed Daesu's face. Yesterday he made a joke, an actual joke. I nearly had a heart attack. Patricia snorted despite herself. Gerald made a joke? A bad one. Something about spreadsheets. But still, Daesu's expression grew serious again. The point is, you're good for him, better than anyone I've ever seen him with, and I don't want what happened with Yolanda to destroy what you two have built. That's not entirely up to you. I know, but I wanted you to understand. Daesu leaned forward slightly. He didn't mean to hurt her. He was drowning, and he didn't know how to ask for help. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. Patricia studied the big man carefully. Why do you care so much? He's your employer, not your friend. Something shifted in Daesu's expression. He's both, even if he doesn't know it. The admission hung in the air between them, unexpectedly vulnerable. Patricia softened slightly. You really do care about him. I've watched him carry the weight of that company alone for 3 years. Watched him isolate himself, push people away, convince himself he doesn't need anyone. Gwat. Daesu's voice was gruff. Then you showed up and started yelling at him, and something broke open. In a good way. I do yell at him a lot. He needs it. Daesu almost smiled. Someone has to. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia stood. Would you like some water? You already offered. I'm offering again. It's a nervous habit. Patricia walked to the kitchen and filled 2 glasses. Here. Hydrate. You look like you haven't had an emotion in 12 years, and this conversation is exhausting you. Daesu accepted the water and took a long drink. Thank you, he said, for listening. Thank you for coming. Patricia sat back down. It couldn't have been easy. It was terrible. Daesu's delivery was completely deadpan. I practiced the conversation in the car for 20 minutes. I still think I did it wrong. Patricia laughed. A real laugh. The first one she'd had in days. You did fine, Daesu. Really. The big man nodded, looking relieved. He stood, setting down his empty glass. For what it's worth, he said at the door, I hope you come back. The mansion is very quiet without you, and Mrs. Park has been stress cooking. There's enough kimchi jjigae to feed an army. Tell Mrs. Park I'll be back to help eat it, eventually. Daesu nodded once more, then ducked out the door, leaving Patricia alone with her thoughts. 1 week into her self-imposed exile, Patricia's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Hello? Is this Patricia Lawson? The voice was familiar, but Patricia couldn't immediately place it. Who's asking? It's Yolanda. Yolanda Price. Patricia nearly dropped the phone. How did you get this number? I have my ways. Yolanda's voice was different than Patricia remembered. Softer, less aggressive. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to, but I have something to tell you. Something important. Patricia's guard was up, but curiosity won. I'm listening. There was a long pause on the other end. He came to see me, Yolanda said finally. Gerald, 2 days ago. Patricia's heart stopped. What? He tracked me down. Showed up at my workplace. I'm at a physical therapy clinic in Pasadena now, and asked if we could talk. Yolanda let out a shaky breath. I almost called security, almost told him to go to hell, but something about the way he looked. I don't know. He looked different. Different how? Tired, sad, but also determined. Yolanda seemed to be searching for the right words. He sat down across from me in the break room, and he apologized. Like really apologized. Not the corporate, I'm sorry if you were offended, bullshit. A real apology. Patricia sank onto her couch, her legs suddenly weak. What did he say? He said he was sorry for how I was treated when his father died. He said he was drowning in grief, and he handled my departure badly, that he should have spoken to me personally instead of sending Daesu. He said he never realized I had feelings for him until recently, and that if he'd known, he would have addressed it directly, instead of just letting things end the way they did. Patricia was silent, processing. I told him it didn't matter anymore, Yolanda continued. That it was 2 years ago, and I'd moved on, and he said that was good, but it didn't erase the fact that he'd caused pain, and he wanted me to know that he recognized it. And then he thanked me for my time and left. No excuses, no justifications, no trying to make himself look better, just an acknowledgement and an apology. Patricia closed her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Yolanda was quiet for a moment. Because when I warned you about him in that parking lot, I was projecting. I saw you, and I saw myself 2 years ago, young, smart, falling for a man who lived in a world I didn't understand, and I panicked. I wanted to protect you from getting hurt the way I did. I appreciate that, I think, but I was wrong. Yolanda's voice was steady now. The man who came to see me yesterday? That's not the man who let me walk away without a word 2 years ago. Something changed. Someone changed him. Patricia's throat tightened. I think that someone is you, Yolanda said quietly, and I think maybe you should give him another chance. Because the Gerald Kyung I knew would never have apologized. He wouldn't have even thought to try. You're telling me to go back to him? I'm telling you that people can change, and I think he has. Yolanda paused. I'm not saying what he did to me was okay. It wasn't. But holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him. This conversation, this apology, it helped. It gave me closure I didn't even know I needed. Patricia didn't know what to say. Take care of yourself, Patricia, Yolanda said. And for what it's worth, hold on to that man. I think he's finally becoming the person he was supposed to be. The line went dead. Patricia sat on her couch, phone clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Gerald had apologized to Yolanda. Without being asked, without being forced, without any guarantee that it would help his situation with Patricia. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. And he hadn't even told her. Patricia showed up at the mansion the next morning, unannounced. The gates opened automatically. Her access code still worked, apparently, and she pulled up to the front entrance with her heart pounding in her chest. Before she could even reach for the door handle, it swung open. Gerald stood in the doorway. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled, a shadow of stubble across his jaw. He was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and he looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. He also looked like the most beautiful thing Patricia had ever seen. Patricia, her name came out like a prayer. She walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. You went to see Yolanda, she said. Gerald's expression flickered with surprise. She told you? She called me yesterday. Patricia searched his face. Why didn't you tell me you were going to do that? Because I wasn't doing it for you. I was doing it because it was right. Gerald's voice was rough. I hurt someone through carelessness and cowardice. Apologizing to her wasn't about winning you back. It was about taking responsibility for the damage I caused. Even if it didn't help your situation with me. Even then, Gerald's dark eyes were steady on hers. I've spent 3 years running from hard conversations, avoiding anything that made me uncomfortable. You showed me that's not strength. It's just a different kind of weakness. Patricia felt tears prick at her eyes. That's very emotionally evolved of you. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Gerald's lips quirked slightly, and Mrs. Park has been force-feeding me self-help audiobooks. Apparently I needed to work on my emotional intelligence. Patricia laughed, the sound watery. Mrs. Park is a treasure. Mrs. Park is a menace, but a well-meaning one. They stood in silence for a moment, the space between them charged with everything left unsaid. Then Patricia closed the distance and stepped into Gerald's arms. He caught her immediately, pulling her close, burying his face in her hair. She could feel him trembling slightly, or maybe that was her. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry for not telling you about Yolanda, for being careless with other people's feelings, for making you doubt what we have. You should be sorry. Patricia's voice was muffled against his chest. But I forgive you. Just like that? Not just like that. She pulled back to look at him. You earned it. By doing the hard thing without being asked. By apologizing to someone you hurt, even when it didn't benefit you. Her hand came up to cup his face. That's the man I fell in love with. I just needed to see proof that he actually exists. Gerald leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. He's trying to exist. It's a work in progress. Good thing I'm patient. You're the least patient person I've ever met. Okay, good thing I'm stubborn. Gerald laughed. A real laugh, warm and genuine, and kissed her. It was soft at first, tender, a reunion rather than a seduction. But it deepened quickly, all the fear and doubt and separation of the past week pouring out between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Patricia became aware of a small sound behind them. She turned to find Mrs. Park standing in the foyer, openly weeping into her apron. "Don't mind me," Mrs. Park sniffled. "I'm just so happy. I made breakfast. There's enough for 12 people. I may have stress cooked again." Patricia laughed, wiping her own eyes. "I heard about the kimchi jjigae army." "Oh, that was Tuesday. Today is pancakes." Mrs. Park beamed through her tears. "Welcome home, dear." Patricia looked at Gerald, at Mrs. Park, at the mansion that had somehow become her sanctuary. "It's good to be home," she said. 3 months later, Patricia had fully settled back into life at the mansion. Things were different now, better. The shadow of doubt that had hung over them was gone, replaced by a foundation of honesty and hard-won trust. Gerald had continued his personal evolution, much to everyone's amazement. He actually took days off now. He delegated responsibilities to his team, instead of trying to control everything himself. He'd even learned how to use the TV remote, though Patricia suspected Daesu had secretly programmed it to only have 3 buttons. More importantly, he talked to her about his fears, his doubts, his struggles with his family legacy. And she talked back about her own fears, her own history, the ways they were both learning to build something real together. It wasn't perfect. They still argued. Gerald could still be stubborn and emotionally dense, and Patricia could still be sharp-tongued and impatient. But they argued like people who intended to stay together, not like people looking for exits. One evening, Gerald found Patricia in the library, curled up in her favorite chair with a book. "I have something for you," he said. Patricia looked up, immediately suspicious. "If it's more jewelry, we've discussed this." "It's not jewelry." Gerald sat down on the ottoman in front of her chair, his expression unusually serious. "It's something I should have given you a long time ago." He pulled out a small velvet box. Patricia's heart stuttered. "Gerald, before you panic, it's not that kind of box." He opened it to reveal a simple golden key. "This is the key to my home, officially. I know you've had access codes and staff know you, but I wanted you to have something physical. Something real." Patricia stared at the key, tears threatening. "I want you to know that this is your home," Gerald continued. "Not just a place you stay, not just somewhere you can leave when things get hard. This is yours, Patricia, as long as you want it. Gerald. And someday, if you're willing, I'd like to give you a different kind of key." His voice was soft but certain. "But for now, I want you to know that whatever happens, you have a place here, with me." Patricia took the key, feeling its weight in her palm. "You're getting very good at this emotional stuff," she said, her voice thick. Mrs. Park's audiobooks. Also therapy. "You started therapy? You said I needed to work on my emotional intelligence." Gerald smiled slightly. "I'm nothing if not thorough." Patricia laughed, setting aside her book and pulling him up onto the chair with her. It was a tight fit, but neither of them minded. "I love you," she said against his lips. "Even when you're emotionally constipated and terrible at TV remotes. I love you too." He kissed her softly. "Even when you're terrifying and throw artwork at people's heads." That was one time. It was a very memorable time. They settled into comfortable silence, tangled together in the library chair, watching the sunset paint the windows gold. Everything was peaceful, perfect. Until Daesu appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Boss." "Miss Patricia." He cleared his throat. "There's been a delivery from a legal firm." Gerald straightened immediately, his body going tense. "What kind of delivery?" Daesu held out a thick manila envelope. "They say it's regarding your father's estate." Apparently there was a secondary will, one that wasn't disclosed during the original proceedings. Patricia felt the atmosphere shift, the warmth of moments ago replaced by something colder. Gerald took the envelope with steady hands, but Patricia could see the tension in his jaw. "A secondary will?" she asked. "How is that possible?" "I don't know." Gerald opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Patricia watched his face as he read, saw the color drain from his skin, saw his eyes widen with shock. "Gerald, what is it?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the papers in his hands, like they had personally betrayed him. Patricia took the documents from his unresisting fingers and scanned the first page. It was a will. Signed by Gerald's father, dated 6 months before his death, and according to this document, 40% of the Kyung business empire had been left not to Gerald, but to a beneficiary whose name made Patricia's blood run cold. Yolanda Price, the woman who had warned Patricia away from Gerald, the woman Gerald had just apologized to, the woman they'd both thought was firmly in their past. Patricia looked at Gerald, then at the documents, then at Daesu's grim face. "What the hell?" she whispered. Gerald's expression had hardened into something unreadable. "Get me my lawyers," he said quietly. "All of them." "Gerald," Patricia started, "and find out everything there is to know about Yolanda Price." Gerald's voice was ice. "Because either this document is a forgery, or my father was keeping secrets that are about to destroy everything. And that's where we're leaving it, beautiful people. 40% of the Kyung Empire left to Yolanda? Gerald's father's secret will? What is going on? We know, we're petty for leaving you here, but that's what part 3 is for, and trust us, you're going to want to be here when it drops on Patreon. Hurry over to Patreon to get access to the next episode. Trust me, you'll be stunned by what happens next. Your support on Patreon makes stories like this possible, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you. If you haven't already, make sure to follow us so you get notified the moment part 3 goes live. Thank you for reading, beautiful people. We love you, and we'll see you in part 3.